Yeah, you couldn't click fast enough, could you? Folks, Fernando with another video, and yes, it's gonna be 12 reasons why United States sucks. Now, this is not me, it's a reaction from another channel, as you see there, Trip Bitten. It's very interesting. This is a guy that has lived 12 years abroad. Now, he has been living in China, apparently, and his opinions about China has changed as well. Now, after watching this, I must say I agree with almost everything he says in terms of what is your opinion from outside, viewing things from a different country. There's things that I obviously don't agree with him, but I think it's a healthy exercise to watch people that maybe you agree with a bunch of things, and I promise you will agree with many things he says, and you will disagree with some others. So let's get to it and comment what we see from this guy.
After living abroad for so long. I saw a TikTok asking other Americans that live abroad the same question, how their views have changed since they've moved abroad and how they view the US now. And I thought it'd be interesting to add this into my 12 Years Abroad series, so let's jump right in with number 12, which is freedom. We are jumping right into it with freedom. If you know anything about the US, then you know what I'm talking about. The US prides itself on its freedoms. I don't know how many times I was told growing up that America is the land of the free and the home of the brave, and I should be willing to die for that freedom. As you can imagine, I just kind of believed it because I didn't know better, and why would they lie about that? Well, I can tell you my opinion has definitely changed since traveling and living abroad. It turns out the US isn't even in the top 10 freest countries according to the Human Freedom Index. It is in the top 20, ranked at 15, but the way the media and government talk about freedom in the US makes it sound like all other countries are imprisoning their people and forcing them to work, which is kind of ironic because the US actually ranks number 1 in incarcerated people. According to World Prison Brief, the United States leads the world in total number of people incarcerated, with more than 2 million prisoners nationwide. My views have definitely changed on the US being the freest country in the world. The US does have a lot of freedoms and has a strong judicial system, but so do other countries around the world. And the US is not ranked number 1.
Yeah, well, regarding that, he's absolutely right about the incarceration rate. It's not just that, it is a big business, which is one of the problems with many things in the United States that he will continue to list. The problem is how business becomes more important than the lives of people that supposedly the government is looking after and guarding those interests. So instead of guarding the interests and protecting the interests of the people that the government is supposed to in some way represent, you know how that goes, it is shamelessly favoring the financial business interests of big corporations and extremely rich individuals, which is not always the case in other countries. In other countries, even though that happens to an extent as well, it is not as bad as it is in the United States in most of the other developed countries. You have different places and so on. But he's absolutely right about the incarceration rate is insane in the United States, which just goes against the idea of being the most free country on the planet. Not only that, the amount of idiotic, stupid things that could potentially land you in jail in the United States, most of them are not crimes for which you end up in jail in other places. And I'm talking about things that you question really, how many years are you spending in jail for exactly what? And usually it's things that affect the interest of the US government. So that is quite ironic, especially when compared to countries like China that tend to do that sort of thing in their own way. Let's go on.
Moving on to number 11 on our list is something that many people argue about and often goes hand in hand with the idea of freedom, and that is gun ownership in the US. It is very interesting to talk with people who are not from the US and who haven't grown up with gun ownership being a common and real thing. Growing up in the US, it was normal to own guns, and many people I knew had guns. I remember my brother having a shotgun in his house, and I didn't think it was that strange or weird. But this isn't normal globally, and actually only 3 countries have constitutional rights to own a gun. While most countries allow gun ownership, they impose strict laws regulating which types of guns you can own and how they are stored. According to Insider, Americans own nearly half of all the civilian-owned guns in the world, and on a per capita basis, the US has far more guns than any other nation. With so many guns come mass shootings, which is a uniquely US thing. These attacks rarely occur in other countries, and the frequency and destruction caused by these attacks is heartbreaking. My views have changed a lot on gun ownership from this is normal to what is wrong with the US?
Okay, so this obviously would be one of the points we strongly disagree with. It's not just that we strongly disagree. I mean, many of us probably do. Maybe you don't. I don't know who's watching this, but it's not just that you probably don't agree. He's actually wrong in his appreciation regarding how easy or how popular are guns in our parts of the world. There's parts of the world, and in my opinion, if you're asking best country in the world, Switzerland. Not perfect, but yeah, I think that is the best when you encompass and look at all the potential benefits, pros and cons. It is a country that has a ton of guns. And even though I don't think you have a specific constitutional right to own guns, it is so embedded in their culture that having a gun, if you compare all states, it's probably easier to get yourself a firearm. In Switzerland, yes, you do have some kind of a bureaucracy involved. It is very minimal, and the amount of guns you can get is quite surprising. I mean, I'm not a Swiss citizen, and even I can own guns, like the one you see over there, which is a short barrel rifle according to U.S. gun laws, and is usually a lot more control than your rifle that has a barrel longer than 16 inches. That's a 14.5-inch M4 Colt. So that's the kind of gun that a lot of people in the United States probably don't even know that it's perfectly legal in other parts of the world. It's you have to look at each country specifically, which obviously this man is not much of a gun nut or a gun hobbyist. He's not a believer in the constitutional right to own guns as something that's strongly linked to freedom and liberty, which I do believe, and it's maybe one of the strongest, best things the United States has going for it. But other countries have guns as well, and it's not all that complicated to buy guns elsewhere. In fact, it's probably a lot easier to buy guns in other countries than in certain anti-gun states in U.S. In fact, you get your gun permit, right? Well, yeah, you can get anything. It's all a gun. 12-inch shotgun, yeah, it's a gun. A 10-inch barrel, no one gives a damn. It's still a gun. Same thing. In the United States, it's usually a little bit more complex. So it's not always the case that everything is banned everywhere else, and it's not also the case that, as he's implying, gun violence is related to firearms at all. I mean, I have a knife right there, right? And knife crime is a problem, for example, in UK. There's a problem with people stabbing one another. It gets to a point where it becomes cultural. It's more about violence in general, and guns, just like knives or any other tool, is what people end up using. But you have countries that have very strong gun cultures. You have countries where guns are fairly popular. I get it. He's been living in China, so he hasn't got maybe experience with countries that, do have a stronger gun culture. When you look at this, you think, oh, that's a Glock. Yeah, Glocks are not originally from US. These are from Austria. So that gives you an idea of how much of a big thing guns are in other places.
Speaking of what is wrong with the US, next on our list at number 10, which ties back into the last 2 points, is national pride. Americans are extremely patriotic, and they believe that the US is the best country in the world, and you better not disagree with them because they might shoot you. Jokes aside, they are extremely patriotic because they've been lied to their whole lives. The US is a good country, but it is not the best country or worth chanting USA, USA, USA everywhere you go. Most Americans don't realize how bad they're getting screwed by the corporations in the government, and they truly believe that the US is number one in the world. It really depends on what you are ranking, but the US is usually in the middle or lower half of a top 20 list. From freedoms to quality of life to education, the US is ranked all over the place and rarely is number one, except for prisoners, guns, military spending, GDP, and a few other things that aren't very flattering. It isn't until you move abroad and remove yourself from the media-enforced lies that you start to realize the rest of the world isn't that bad, and some countries are even better than the US. In one way, many countries are better than the US is education.
Okay, so regarding national pride, I don't see anything particularly wrong with having pride in your own country. Again, I think this is something that, given his experience abroad, being in China, where they have a very, subdued way of being, the population, the culture, in other countries, I mean, every country I've lived in, people tend to be very proud and think that their country is, if not the best, it's kind of over there. And yes, it depends on where you are. For example, I'm originally from Argentina. That is my country. Right now, you're playing the FIFA World Cup. And whatever it is you see, you will find a bunch of Argentines with an Argentine shirt going, jersey, going exactly Argentina, Argentina, just like US, US. So yes, other countries do have pride. And is it wrong? Well, I don't think it's wrong to be proud of your country. I think that it may align with your beliefs or not, more or less. For example, if you like asado and football, and you like friendship and having strong social connections, probably Argentina is one of the best places for you. And I know for a fact of people that are from Argentina with a great education that could have made it anywhere and still choose to live in Argentina because that's what they feel most connected to. I have no doubt that someone in China that is very typical Chinese and feels very strongly about how much he loves his country will think that his country is the best. And same for someone from United States or Germany or wherever. So I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with being proud of your country. Now, there's this thing about and this is cultural as well, the idea that American exceptionalism, that nothing could possibly be better than the United States. That is something that is culturally engraved in in people's minds. And yes, it serves a purpose beyond your typical national pride, more of a militaristic approach to it, probably something like that. Let's go on.
Number 9 on our list is education. According to results from the Program for International Student Assessment, the U.S. ranks 39th in math, 23rd in reading, and 25th in science out of 73 surveyed countries. This is low for a country that claims to be number 1. After living abroad for some time, it is clear that the U.S. does not value public education, and universities are run like businesses. The cost of higher education is appalling compared to the rest of the world, and don't get me started on public schools. There are videos of teachers asking for school supplies, and Mr. Beast just did a video about helping students and teachers because the U.S. government doesn't provide enough resources.
Pretty bad. It's terrible.
The U.S. government doesn't seem to care about education, and this means the general public also doesn't seem to care about education. Just search "Americans are idiots" and you will see how bad it is. Not to mention the dangers around teaching. After living abroad for a long time, it has become clear that education is not a high priority in the U.S., which is a shame because it is the best way for people to improve their lives and economic situation. Speaking of improving situations, we are about to hit number 8.
Okay, yeah, education sucks in the United States. I think everyone can agree with that. If not, well, it does. It's pretty terrible, and it's been getting a lot worse lately. So when you compare it to education in other places, what you immediately notice is that it's been, again, just like with the prison system, it's been taking over, especially higher education, it's been taking over by companies and the idea of pure profit rather than actually having education. Now, here is where you are manipulated by the narrative of, public education sucks, it's only for commies and socialists, when in reality, back in the day when the United States was a lot less communist than it is right now, public education was a lot better. So it's more about keeping people stupid and letting companies run their business like they do with everything else, rather than, you don't understand how great education is here, you just don't have a clue. So I would agree with him that, it is quite bad, and the standards are decreasing. I think there's a lot to do with, just like it happened with higher education in terms of being taken over by private businesses, the idea is to do the ultimate profit move, which is taking over primary and secondary schools as well. It's going more towards public schools suck, you have to send your kid to a private school, and that's good because public schools are for communists, when in reality, nothing could be further from the truth. In reality, and take it as someone that has been living most of his life in a third world nation, the more shitty your country is, the more shitty your public schools are. The better your country is, the better public education a country has. That is a rule to always keep in mind, because it is just like that.
Before I reveal that one, be sure to hit the like button because it really helps improve the situation of this video.
Yeah, it's actually quite good.
Okay, let's jump back in with number 8, which is healthcare. I remember growing up that I never went to the doctor, and I never understood why. It was just my family didn't go to the doctor unless somebody was dying. I mean, literally, the one time I spent the night in the hospital, I was actually dying, and if I didn't have a surgery, I would have died. And I never really thought anything of it, it's just we didn't go to the doctor. Well, it turns out we didn't go because it costs a fortune just for a simple checkup. The US has state-of-the-art hospitals and medicine, but unless you are rich or have good insurance, good luck accessing it. The US spends more of its GDP on healthcare than any other high-income countries, yet ranks last in access to care, administrative efficiency, equality, and healthcare outcomes, according to the nonprofit Commonwealth Fund. I just typed into Google what countries have universal healthcare, and I realized it would be faster to look up which countries don't have universal healthcare. Some of the countries that don't have universal healthcare include Pakistan, Yemen, Syria, and of course, the United States. Basically, the entire world is covered in some form by a government-backed program, but the US is the only high-income country that doesn't have adequate and affordable coverage. Affordable being the key word in that last sentence. There are people that pay thousands of dollars on medication and treatment each month in the US, but if they lived in almost any other country, it would be free or affordable.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's right.
My views
Absolutely
have changed a lot on healthcare in the United States since leaving. And it's one of those situations that could be solved if people were willing to, and if the corporations didn't make so much profit off of keeping the system the way it is. And it's such a shame because people are, suffering because of this system.
Yeah, absolutely right. I agree with him entirely, 100% on everything he just said. The only thing I would add, though, is it's not all countries the same. Some countries are becoming more like US, offering medical insurance rather than health care. And there's a big difference. You have to look at each country specifically. I've lived in countries that had medical insurance, and I've lived in countries that have health care. In a country like Argentina, for example, which is a very much developing third world country, whatever you want to call it, you know what I'm talking about, you still have health care. If you pay for it monthly, you will be able to get checkups, and it's not something that's going to be hiking your insurance rate through the roof. It's understood that you do get checkups and you do have basic things covered. It's not something that's pleasurable to go to the doctor. In other countries, and the UK is becoming more and more like US, probably because of, different, financial and business moves going on, but they're losing a lot of what NHS used to be, and it's becoming more and more like this car insurance thing. I was surprised by how just even getting a basic checkup all of a sudden sent your premiums through the roof. In other countries, you just pay for your medical insurance, and as you get older, you may end up paying a little bit more, but it's understood that it's something that no one wants to be sick. No one likes going to the doctor. So things like having basic checkups and common things are not something that's going to be breaking the bank for you. And it's usually complemented quite nicely by a very solid public healthcare system, which you still have to pay for. You have to pay for everything. Nothing is free in this world. But with a good public system and a good private system, you have nice options. It's usually the case that when you have good public system, the private one is a lot more affordable. And this is one of the strongest points against the United States, how terrible medical care is over there compared to most other countries, in most other developed countries especially. And you will have shills and sellouts and people following a certain narrative that will tell you, you're completely wrong, you don't have any clue. Yes, I do. I know exactly what I'm talking about, and healthcare in the United States is quite bad. You just have to check how people end up, asking for donations for some of the most idiotic things that you would think should be covered by even a basic health insurance. But difference between insurance and actual healthcare. Let's go on.
One of the ways it is profitable is by treating obesity-related health issues, which brings us to number 7 on our list, food. In the TikTok video I was watching about Americans and how their views had changed after living abroad, many of them were complaining about gaining weight or getting sick when they moved back to the United States because of the food.
Yeah, yes.
The food industry in the US is basically producing poison. The FDA allows food and packaging companies to use harmful chemicals when handling and processing food.
Notice how you always go back to the same thing. It's always the same thing. It's about companies having insane amount of profit margins and being allowed to run whatever the hell they want to go with, and your government not really doing much so as to look after your interests rather than looking for the profit margins of these companies. It always comes down to this. I don't know if you see it.
Which can cause cancers and other health problems. Again, growing up in the US, eating Pop-Tarts for breakfast seemed like a normal thing to do.
Yeah, it's...
Little Debbie snacks and mac and cheese with hot dogs was a balanced diet, all washed down with Coca-Cola. It wasn't until I moved that I realized that some of the obesity problems in the US are actually food problems. It is easy to blame and say it is an individual's problem.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is part of the problem. But also a lot of the issues are related to the food industry and access to healthy foods. But changing the laws are much harder and not as profitable as changing people's attitude towards obesity. Now, if somebody
normalizing
says they
obesity.
are fat or unhealthy, they will get canceled for body shaming. So obviously my views have changed a lot in relationship to healthcare and food in the United States. Which brings us nice...
Yeah, so you get the idea. And it's always easy to point the finger at, it's your fault. You're the one putting that burger in your face, right? It is your fault to a certain extent. But this, if you accept this as an excuse, then what is the only conclusion? What, Americans are stupid? They're too idiotic to make good decisions? Or is there something else going on here? If you look at a population level, it cannot possibly be that all Americans are more stupid than people in other countries. There's something else going on, and I can tell you right away what it is. It is that companies are allowed to manipulate, lie, coerce, and basically use social engineering tools so as to make people okay with being morbidly obese. Because if not, it's fat shaming. Even advertising targeting children, that's not allowed in some other countries. You cannot do advertising so as to get a kid to eat something that's not healthy for him. That's something that in other countries simply does not exist.
To our next point on the list, woke culture. A quote that always makes me laugh is, if you're not a liberal when you're 25, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative by the time you're 35, you have no brain. The cultural war that is raging right now in the US is insane, like literally insane. And it's all a distraction to keep people from enacting any real change in the government or society.
Yeah, I agree.
If all sides are fighting with each other and themselves, the people in power and the corporations can pass legislation that hurts both sides and makes them more profit. The last thing they want is for all sides to unite under their common struggle and oust the people currently in power. The craziest thing is that when you are removed from it and you're living abroad, you can just see how crazy and insane it is and how damaging it is to society. While Americans are fighting about what a woman is or if the celebrity has used the correct pronoun, the rest of the world knows what a woman is and isn't wasting time on things that don't make their country or
you only see it on YouTube from
While
America.
American students are in their gender study classes wondering if they are a man, woman, or other, Chinese and Indian students are in their maths and physics classes gaining real knowledge that might lead to the next breakthrough in science or technology. Learning about someone's gender isn't a real skill and won't create a breakthrough that could revolutionize any industry. It isn't even medical science. At best, we might learn about groupthink when people study this time period in the future. But in its current form, woke culture and the backlash to it is destroying society. Societies only exist when people are willing to share the same goal and work towards that goal together. Currently, both sides are unwilling to find common ground, and they're literally tearing each other apart. They're tearing the society apart. And the people in power absolutely love it. My views have changed a lot on this after traveling to many countries because these types of debates aren't even considered in most places. Most people around the world are too concerned about feeding their families and improving their lives to even think about pronouns. But enough about all that. We've made it to number 5 on the list, and if you're still here, then you probably agree with me.
Yeah, anyway, couldn't agree with him more. All the woke insanity, you just don't see it in other parts. I mean, you will find maybe a minuscule group, something that is insignificant, and then it is magnified by the US media. Like, look at this guy in Germany doing... But actually go to Germany and how much of a woke culture you have going on there or any other developed country. It is mostly the United States where you see this kind of what is a woman kind of question, which just I don't see other countries wasting a second on that stuff.
Me on many of these points. You probably also know that YouTube will not push this video to anyone, so be sure to like and share it with your friends to help others understand how the US looks from abroad. Next up on this list is another thing that is destroying the United States from the inside, and it's this consumerism, flex culture, celebrity worship. I'm sure there's a term for this, but I don't actually know what it is. It's basically the worship or the love of money. A Harris poll of 3,000 children between the age of 8 to 12 revealed that YouTuber was the first choice of 29% of them. Don't get me wrong, I would love to make a full-time income on YouTube, but I don't think that young people should be inspiring to be social media stars. If the US culture continues to inspire children to become celebrities and OnlyFans stars, the US will lose its competitive advantage in science and technology. When I was growing up, children wanted to be doctors, astronauts, teachers, and scientists. Sure, there were some kids that wanted to be WWE stars or actors, but they were...
Yeah, he drags a little bit on this point, but again, something I agree with him, and at least from my perspective, is... The idea of living, what is it, comparing yourself with the Joneses, is it? Anyway, there's a phrase there, living up to the Joneses or whatever the hell it is, like always comparing what kind of car do I have, what kind of house do I have, what is it that the guy next door has, and it gets to a point where you're basically living on how much material crap you have, and when you realize that all of this is just, material crap that it's nice to have at some point, and maybe having done this myself of, leaving pretty much everything behind and starting over, you realize that as long as, of course, you have the financial means, it is different for someone that lives in extreme poverty or, maybe not extreme, but someone that is very, limited in his financial means, then yes, losing some of this stuff is a lot harder because it's gonna be a lot harder to replace. But if you're somewhat of a middle class, doing okay kind of person, you can buy most of the shit you have already. There's only a few things that are irreplaceable. Things like, for example, my K-bar knife, my World War II K-bar. Replacing a World War II K-bar, I could actually maybe get another one for $400 in that kind of condition. So it would hurt, and yes, it is the one-of-a-kind kind of thing, but for the rest of it, Glock pistols are all the same, cars, it's all just stuff. And obsessing over stuff, which is something that unfortunately is promoted and rewarded in especially in the United States, and as he's saying, the celebrity and trying to live like this fantasy life, that is quite toxic. Let's
breaking or stopping unions. This is a video in itself, but history has shown that workers have benefited the most when strong labor unions force business owners to increase wages and provide more benefits.
So he dragged this into union and whatnot,
in schools,
but it was a longer
point.
point.
To my previous point, workers believe unions cost them money and don't help their employment situation. The second thing I've noticed is that people define them really jump out to me when talking about this. First, Americans have been trained to hate unions. It is surprising just how much effort has gone into breaking or stopping unions. This is a video in itself, but history has shown that workers have benefited the most when strong labor unions force business owners to increase wages and provide more benefits. But because this history is not taught in schools, call back to my previous point, workers believe unions cost them money and don't help their employment situation. The second thing I've noticed is that people define themselves by their work. They are what they do. In other countries, people are more concerned about their family relations or hobbies, but in the US, your job is who you are and everything else is secondary.
True. And you stop living, and you mostly end up living for work and not work for to live. And that is something. And one of the things he doesn't say, but the idea of how much do you make? As in someone you barely knew, like. How much money do you make? That's the thing that people seem to be the most interested and ask right away. I've had And this is something that in most other societies, it's considered very impolite. Like, hello, my name is Verno. Hey, how much do you make a year? What is it that you do? How much? Typical thing that sounds kind of bad in most other cultures. That's something that you wouldn't even ask, a close friend how much money you're making, unless he brings it up himself. That is one of the things that you kind of see Americans do pretty often. But this idea of living for work and not working so as to afford the stuff that you need, that would be one of the...
Success is defined by money and not happiness or relationships.
How much money do you have?
People in the U.S. are obsessed with their careers. This creates a culture of unfulfilled and unhappy people because they care so much about their work, but their employer doesn't care about that. I'm not saying it's perfect around the world, but there does seem to be a hyper-focus on productivity and self-worth through work within the United States, which should be changed to create a better working environment for U.S. workers. We are about to make it into the top 3 ways my views have changed on the US, but before we make it to number 1, be sure to hit the like button because I'm afraid that YouTube will suppress this video. YouTube doesn't always push videos that tell the truth, so hit that like button or share it with a friend because they might also like the video. Moving on to number 3, transportation. This one might seem strange at first, but let me explain. If you live in the United States and you want to get around, you have to own a car. Period. Most cities do not have adequate public transportation or even good bike lanes. The U.S. is car dominant,
walking
and
lanes,
without a car, you will struggle to do basic tasks. Things have changed in the last 12 years with ride-sharing apps and food delivery apps, but it is still really difficult to get around in the United States if you don't own a car. Growing up in the U.S., that seemed normal because it is normal for the U.S., but outside of the U.S., many countries have decent public transportation. Countries like the Netherlands, Sweden, and Denmark all have designed cities to incorporate biking, and many people bike to work. Many countries in Asia, like Japan, Korea, and China, have subways and high-speed trains connecting cities and areas, which makes it convenient to get around. With all the money the U.S. government spends on the military and subsidies, it could have redesigned many of the cities to include bike lanes and subway systems.
Europe is full of train tracks.
And the cities encourage biking, people will bike. There are enough examples of cities redesigning their downtown areas and encouraging biking to support the investment, but despite these examples, nothing seems to change. Bus routes, subways, trains, and bike lanes are not developed despite evidence that it improves people's lives and commutes. If the US took a little bit of their military spending and diverted it back into infrastructure, they could create more jobs and better cities. My opinions on public transportation have changed a lot after living and traveling in cities that have good public transportation. Speaking of government spending...
Yeah, so basically, yes, he's absolutely right. My son was asking me this the other day about how is it that being as large as the United States is, it hasn't got not only a decent, but actually a good, train system. All over Europe, you can just hop on a train and pretty much move fast. And it's not just about going from one country to the other. Probably then you go for a plane. But even that, plane tickets are a lot cheaper in Europe than the United States. You can get maybe for $20-$30, you can get a plane ticket from Paris to Rome, $20-$30, no joke. And same for other capitals in countries in Europe. It's simply because it's a lot more affordable, and that is subsidized so as to actually have that happen for people to travel, do tourism, and get to know their neighbors with more ease. But in terms of trains, that's one of the things you look at and say, man, that's weird. Why is that you don't have that in the United States? Well, yeah, people move around with a car. Yeah, it's better. It's not always better. I mean, one of the things you realize is that even people that have, a very nice car, maybe you have 2-3 expensive, like really expensive cars, they will still, you have a Porsche, you have a BMW, and you have an Audi, and you still take the train. Why? Well, because it's more convenient. I'm going on holidays to this whatever country. Well, instead of even renting a car, I just walk out of the plane, just walk a few steps into whatever train takes me to my destination, and I don't even have to go wait, get a car, get a key, then worry about leaving the car, and it's even maybe less walk than going to the parking lot to pick up the car and having to worry about parking the thing and so on. So even if you do have have your car, sometimes it's simply more convenient to use public transportation, especially train. Bus, it's kind of like sucky, even though they're nice, I think, in most other developed countries. The train, I find the one that at times you say, I'll just take the train and don't even bother looking for a parking spot, or even bother paying for parking, or just not even driving. I don't want to drive today. I just want to keep on walking and walk onto a train and keep on walking out of it, and that's it.
Number 2 on our list is the U.S. government, and there are 2 things I want to talk about. Let's first talk about the military. The U.S. doesn't need to police the world. By taking on this role, it has allowed other nations to expect and rely on U.S. military support, but that has weakened both the U.S. and reliant nations. It has weakened reliant nations because they spend less money on their own militaries, and it has weakened the U.S. because the U.S. spends too much money on the U.S. military.
Yeah, this is one of the points that he's getting wrong, that a lot of Americans get wrong. Like, the United States polices the world, so everyone is taking advantage of poor us. We don't want to do this, but the other countries, those assholes in Portugal, they are forcing our hands into financing their own security. That's not true. That is simply, yet again, one of the lies that he very cleverly detected throughout the video, that he's been, installed in his brain since childhood. But it's not that other countries want the United States to police the entire planet. It is actually kind of one of the things that makes people like the United States less because of. So, the idea is the following. The United States economy runs on war and military spending. If you do what he says of, instead of spending all that money in military expense and everything linked to the military budget, which is not always weapons, helicopters, and bombs, there's a lot more going besides that. If you cut that back, you reduce the U.S. economy to a point where it's going nowhere. It's not growing. You are even worse off than in the recession that we all are already. And this has been the case for, 70, 80 years. This is the way the U.S. economy runs. And of course, since the United States will spend this anyway and will force your hand if you don't go along with it, as it has happened to several countries already, then yeah, you want to do all the military spending for everyone else, go ahead, do it. What could we possibly do against it? And you want to be the police of the world? Well, it hasn't been working all that great, but there's not much smaller nations that have a lot less military force can do. The idea that countries that haven't got a fraction of the military power that the United States has is someone taking advantage of the United States. It is. You get my point.
If the U.S. spent 10 or 20% less on the military each year and diverted it back into building the U.S., it would be a stronger nation in terms of domestic strength.
Yeah, it would be better for the average guy on the street in UK, but you know who it wouldn't be better for? Let's try to guess. Let's try to guess who could possibly not be okay with that approach of is cutting the military spending to half and investing that in transportation, in real affordable healthcare, in education for everyone, in trains and stuff that people actually use in most other developed nations. Who could not be happy with that? Of course, the same people that are benefiting from the military expense and all of the other military expense that we've been seeing up until now.
Healthcare, schools, infrastructure, and public services. But that will never happen because the U.S. government is fractured and dysfunctional.
No, the U.S. government is working perfectly, but working perfectly so as to favor the same elite that wants public schools to be shit, so as to have people go and pay for their private schools, for their private universities, for their private even primary schools, which not that long ago was something only reserved for the most snobbish elite you could think of. Normal kids went to public schools. Now public schools are shit like in the third world, and people are looking for affordable choices, and soon enough there won't even be affordable choices. It will be very expensive for you to send your kid to a school where he's not getting shot at.
Which brings us to the second point that I want to address. The two parties are not working to benefit the people, and because of this, people are voting more and more extreme. The U.S. government allows lobbies to push specific agendas that don't benefit the people, and because of this, the people vote for anyone that promises change. right or left, it doesn't matter because both sides are becoming more and more unhinged. The two sides are no longer working together, and the lobbies are funding special projects that only benefit the corporations.
That's the big point.
Politicians are corrupt and always have been, but now it seems like there is less cooperation between the two sides. And this is all spurred on by the mainstream media, which brings us to our final point.
Yeah.
But before I talk about...
Couldn't agree with this point of his more. I completely believe this is the main cause of all of the criticism that we've seen during this entire video.
Mainstream media, be sure to hit that like button because YouTube is part of the problem and they will probably suppress this video. Okay, let's talk about the US media. It's all fake news. I don't support Trump or his policies, but I totally understand him and why people voted for him. He coined the term fake news, but he's not wrong. You can't even really call it news anymore, and it's bad on both sides. In the past, we used to have tabloids in the supermarkets at the checkouts, and they would always have the most ridiculous headlines like, "Woman gives birth to alien and claims the father is Joe Biden. We have the exclusive interview, you won't believe what she said." We all knew it was fake, but it was kind of fun to read. Nowadays, this is every news headline. Because the news is a business and needs to make money, they will print the most outrageous headlines to get more views and clicks. Mix the mainstream media in with social media and actual fake news by your favorite YouTuber, and you create a nation of misinformed people. If you can't distinguish between lies and truth, then you will forever be lost. And I feel many people in the United States right now are lost. They are fighting over lies, and because they want something to be true, they are willing to believe lies. This goes for both sides. Doesn't matter which opinion you hold about a topic, someone is creating content to push you farther down the rabbit hole. As long as there's money to be made off of content, then Fox and CNN and YouTube and TikTok and Facebook and Twitter, all of the social media platforms will continue to push this content out regardless of the truth. This is not just a US problem, but because most of the mainstream media is US based or US centric, and because most of the popular apps are US based, it is a major problem for the US. My opinion on news and popular apps have changed a lot after moving abroad, and I think this problem will continue until better regulations are implemented. So there you have it, 12 ways.
Okay, yeah, I think he's right with this last point. I think he's missing the point of why is it that these media corporations and these media groups push for this division, this fake narrative, whatever side you're in. Why is it that they do it? Well, they do it because they look after the interests of the people that own these media groups, which happen to be the same financial elite that owns all of the other stuff you've been talking up until this moment. So if you own the media group that makes sure you benefit from the disinformation, from the lies, from confusing, from polarizing people, and from having a poorly educated society, then of course that's what you push, that's what you promote, that's what you put out there. At times he's wrong about this idea of we just say any kind of bullshit because it's all about content and clicks. No, at times many of these companies promote a certain agenda at a loss. You think that Disney is making money with the shit they're doing these days? I mean, other than the Mandalorian and Andor, which are kind of good. I actually talked about those in my entertainment channel. Other than that, they have terrible content, and they still do it because it's promoting the agenda. It's going with the message, rather than worrying about, hey, how much money are we actually making with this crap? No one is watching it. Oh, we still have to do it. And the same goes for other companies aligned and actually owned by the elites. Folks, that's all for now. Remember, if you want to learn how to survive, prepare for all of this and the future, then you have Surviving the Economic Collapse and Street Survival Skills, my books available in Amazon, following the links below there. See you on the next one. Take care.